Hey everyone, Matt here from Herbal House, and in this video we're going to be taking a closer look at the HPS Starter Grow Kit, which we have briefly set up behind me. We're going to cover what options we have on offer here with the Starter Grow Kit. Of course, we do have a few variations of lighting, ventilation, and of course tent. So we'll be covering those very shortly in the video, but I felt like it's worth mentioning what you're going to expect to receive. So pretty much with any option you go for, you are going to receive one rather large box here. There is going to be a bit of weight to it, of course, because this is going to have everything in it, from your lighting, your ventilation, and your accessories. The one thing that isn't included is, of course, the tent. So this is the tent box over here. Now what you will find is this will change in size depending on what tent you go for, but not by a heck of a lot. So we'll cover that shortly. Okay, so starting with the tent options we have here, as you can see the boxes all look very similar, but the tents within them are quite different. So bear in mind all of these tents are 2 meters tall in height. So over here we have the 80 centimeter by 80 centimeter tent, we have the 100 by 100 tent, the 120 and the 150 by 150 tent. So obviously it pays to measure your space where you will be putting this tent, as they can consume quite a bit of volume when you do set them up, and it is well worth double checking that. So moving on from here, we're going to take a look at the lighting option and we'll set that up to show you. Okay, so moving on to the lighting, I feel like it's worth starting with the digital ballast that we have here, as we do offer a 400 watt and 600 watt lighting option. The key difference between those options is the bulbs, because what we do is we provide you with a dimmable digital ballast here, the 4 Seasons commercial version, and that allows you to have either a 250 watt, 400 watts or 600 watt option, and of course super lumens. So for a lot of people it's very cost effective to go for the 600 watt option and then simply lower it down to 400 watts or 450 watts if necessary, or even lower. Very versatile product, which is why we include them in this kit, and of course they do have the lovely 4 Seasons packaging with them as well. They've proven to be a very reliable ballast. We're absolutely chuffed with them. So what we're going to do is move on to the bulb selection from here. Okay, so what we've done here is we have laid out the bulb options. We have the 600 watt option over here and we have the 400 watt option over here. So I just wanted to cover a little bit of a closer detail on the bulbs, and that is the difference between them. What you'll see is the larger bulbs here on the back side. These are your metal halide bulbs, so these are going to be producing a very cold white spectrum, typically used for vegetative growth. And in the front here we have the much more formal shape high pressure sodium bulb. So this is producing the more of an orangey or a warm coloured white light, typically used for your flowering cycle. So now that we've got the bulbs out of the way, I'll just quickly run through the shade. So here is the adjustable wing reflector, which is going to house either bulb option you go for. It is the same between either option, of course. Now what we will note here is you need to remove the protective film before you fire this thing up, just a side note there. And of course it is nice and flexible, so you can mold this to suit either coverage or requirement that you have, and not forgetting that adjustable hangers are included that will hook onto these hooks at the back here that can be folded up and set up like so. So now that we've covered the lighting option, let's move on to the fan kits. So to start with, what we have done here is laid out the 2 100mm fan options, just because it's a little easier to digest. You of course get your core component, which is the 100 by 500 imperial ventilation filter with additional sleeve and hanging mounts, fantastic. 5 meters of flexible ducting and a couple of clamps to get you going. So this is where the real difference is, and that's between the two fans. We have the very traditional centrifugal fan option over here. These are tried and tested. They've been fantastic over the last several decades, and we still include these as an option because they are very cost effective. They include a speed controller, so you can regulate the entire speed of this fan, but they are more commercially orientated in the sense that they are reasonably powerful and a touch on the noisy side for some domestic customers. So what we've done here is we're now including the AC Infinity. So these are pretty much top of the line, the latest and greatest of fan technology. The main reason being that they are quiet and they are controllable. So in that sense, I mean that they have this included controller which connects to your phone via an app. Very modern, and the idea being you can have very accurate speed control. You can set automatic modes for thermal regulation, and it is data plotting graphs as one of the few key bullet points here. They do also include a few extra accessories. So now that we've covered the 2 100 options, we're going to move over and show you the 150mm options. And here we have the 150mm options laid out in front of you. Of course, the core components are the 150 by 500 long imperial carbon filter with extra white pre-sleeve, 5 meters of 150 ducting and a couple of clamps to connect it all together. So we're just going to explain the key differences between the fans, starting with the inline option. So this is a 150 millimeter fan, of course. The idea is these fans are 2-speed between a high and a low speed. They're quite simple and they're really robust and great for domestic application if you're on a budget. They move a fair amount of air, of course being in the 150 size, it's a little more desirable for those high heat load conditions, but a great, reliable and economical fan, most importantly of all. So moving on, of course, we have the AC Infinity option in the 150 millimeter for those who are looking for a really high flow fan, because the AC Infinities do move more air than their counterparts. And of course, they have more bells and whistles than you could ever want from a fan, which is why a lot of people go for them with the touch interface like we covered earlier and the app connection. Now, they do include a few extra accessories in there for tidying things up for the installation. So now that we've covered the fan equipment, we'll just run through the few accessories that are also included with the kit, and then we'll show you everything set up. Last but not least are the key accessories. We mentioned earlier that you get the adjustable hangers for the lampshade, a 24-hour timer for regulating the light cycle, a hygrometer for measuring your humidity and temperature. I will mention the AC Infinities have this built in as well, which is a great way to have a second set of instruments for measuring. A set of filter straps so you can hang filter or fan equipment, and a full set of instructions for setting things up, but we do of course have some YouTube videos for covering the finer details of setting the equipment up. Now that we've covered those, we're going to move over to the tent and show you an installation. Okay, so as you can see here, we have set up some equipment in a 120 by 120 by 200 high tent. Now bear in mind that all of the tent options throughout the kit selection are the Eclipse Elite series. So that's got the diamond mylar pattern on the inside. Great robust tents featuring the SBS thick tooth zippers. They've got shorter stitching so that the zip's going to hold on longer. The larger tents do have double access doors on either side, and of course a viewing window. Not to mention all tent sizes have excellent selection for ports and ventilation. You really can't go wrong. That's just the canvas itself. The structures are of the 19mm powder coated poles, 19mm connected corners that are welded. So no plastic, so you can guarantee it's going to last a lot longer and take a much harder beating depending on whatever you're doing with these tents. For a lot of people, they might be moving them around, so it's good to know that it's nice and sturdy. So moving on from the tent, we've got the ventilation equipment. Now, this would be the 150mm AC Infinity option if you went for that. This is what you can expect to see when you set things up if you do it like us. I'm going to start with the filter, which is the Imperial Ventilation 150mm filter. So that's got the finer grain carbon in them. This is the new series with the hooks on the top. You can hang it from the hooks. We've just used the straps that were included. And the idea is that these filters, when we're testing them, they can basically extract a lot more odor and last a fair bit longer, which is a great thing to see and a huge improvement. Moving on from the filter, we have some ducting, which is just interconnecting from the fan. Because we're including 5 meters of ducting, essentially just cut what you need to length and make it work from there. So we've just connected onto the AC Infinity fan, which is the 150mm option. The one thing you can't see is the AC Infinity controller, which I have in my hand. There's a 6-meter lead to connect from the fan to this controller, so you can have this external of the tent, which I imagine most people will. The only thing to note is the temperature probe needs to be plugged into the bottom, and you want to ensure that the temperature probe is somewhere relative to where you want to be measuring the temperature. Most people will have that in the grow space. We just recommend keeping it out of direct light to avoid the temperature reading fluctuating from the heat hitting it. Now, the reason we'd select a 150mm fan option is just the sheer volume of air these things can move. And it's not so much about humidity, it's more about heat management. So what it boils down to for a lot of people is if you're using this sort of equipment during the summer period, it's going to be hot and you need that air being extracted as fast as possible. Being the 150mm AC Infinity, these fans do perform higher airflow rates than any other 150mm fan we've tested, so for a lot of people that would be the go-to option. Plus they are a lot quieter when you do wind them down in speed for a lot of domestic purposes, which of course can all be programmed through this controller or via the app when you're connected to it. So if you were to opt for a 150 fan equipment, you'd expect it to be performing really well through summer. Not to say that the 100mm isn't going to be doing the job as well, but knowing that you've got a safety net of the larger fan capacity can be well worthwhile for a lot of people, especially if the equipment is installed in an uninsulated environment such as a tin shed. You can't expect those to stay very cool in the middle of summer. So for a lot of people, an option like this is going to be the go-to. Moving on to the lighting setup that we've put in this tent here, we've put a 600 watt HPS bulb and we've dialed it down to 250 watts, which is the beauty of the digital ballast. You are able to set them from 250, 400, 600 and super lumens, which is around 640 watts. Very flexible and very versatile for those who are looking to squeeze every bit of efficiency as they can out of the equipment. The idea being that if things are too hot, you can turn it down. If you don't need as much intensity, you can turn it down, and you can of course turn it up. The idea being that we recommend going for the 600 watt lighting option because you do have the versatility to use the entire range of the ballast. Now, as you can see here, there's a lovely orange glow coming from this bulb. This is because it's a 1800 CCT, which is referencing the color temperature, HPS bulb. So this is typically what you're going to be using in your flowering state. A lot of people will change out for the metal halide bulb, which we did include. The idea being that the metal halide is going to be offering a 6000K CCT, so that's a very cold clinical white, and that's going to be fantastic for your veg state growths. Now, a lot of people like to mix and match bulbs for different stages, each to their own, no problem at all. We're just giving you some tips for making the most of the equipment we're providing here. So with that in mind, the adjustable hangers there will allow you to lift and lower the shade itself. As you do that, you are going to be increasing the intensity. Bear in mind you don't want to get too close, but it does allow a lot more versatility for lifting the equipment higher if you need more coverage, such as if you're using a 1.5 by 1.5 meter tent. However, if you are in a smaller tent, you are going to probably narrow the shade by just folding it a little bit to ensure there's enough efficiency dropping straight down onto the plant and not necessarily bouncing off the walls. Now, what you aren't going to see in this setup is the ballast itself. We've situated that external of the tent, the idea being that the ballasts do get pretty toasty under regular operating conditions. Now, bear in mind that they will get hot to the touch, so in a lot of cases we recommend either suspending them in the tent out of the way so the heat can be sucked out by the fan, or resting them on a surface that is safe to put a pretty warm temperature piece of equipment on. Just bearing that in mind, don't wrap them in blankets, they need to keep cool, so you want to look after them. So to wrap up the HPS Starter Grow Kit, we find these to be such a versatile package for so many different people. With the tent sizes on offer and the versatile lighting solution, you really can make the most of any space you're willing to dedicate to the equipment. When we combine that with something like an AC Infinity fan and the Eclipse Elite Grow Tent, it is a great place to be to still expect fantastic results on a really good budget. So we love these kits so much. So I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you have any questions at all, get in touch with us here at Herbal House.